Okay, so what we're going to do this week is create a 3D model of the ever popular UCF Main Stage Theater. We're going to do that by taking our traditional 2D ground plan and section of the space and using those to create a 3D model. When you work in a new theater space, it is really common these days to be able to find a 2D plan of the space, either digital or hand-drawn. It is very uncommon to be able to find a 3D model, so almost always what you have to do is take the 2D plans, the ground plan of the section, and use those as a basis to create a 3D model. So that's what we're going to do. So I've opened up a new document in Vectorworks. And before we get started, I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping, the same thing that we did last week. We want to make sure that we are working in orthogonal and not in perspective. So I'm going to go to Vectorworks Preferences, 3D, and just to make sure here that projection when changing from top plan view to a 3D view is set to orthogonal and not to any of those perspectives. So we want to be in orthogonal. We'll be working in perspective at the very end of the project, but we want to work in orthogonal up until then. The next thing we want to do is set the scale so that we're excuse me, so that we're working in half-inch. So if you're working in the lab here, you will need to turn on the scale, the layer scale here, which will bring up this tool. You click on the ruler and just set the scale to half-inch. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is open up the file from WebCourses that's called UCF Main Stage Ground Plan and Section. So File, Open, my desktop. I've got a bunch of them, but UCF Main Stage Ground Plan and Section. That's what we want. And you should get this familiar looking drawing. So we're just going to copy this entire thing, all of the objects, and paste them into our new drawing. Okay, this is a lot larger because we're working in half-inch scale, and this drawing, as you can see here, says it's an 1/8" scale. So we're done with this drawing now. You can close it. No, I don't need to save anything, and we'll be working straight from here. I can go ahead and get rid of this text because it's not true. We are in fact not in 1/8" scale. So we're going to basically start using the ground plan as a basis to create the model, and then we're going to reference the section a couple times. We are also going to want to keep these 2D drawings handy, and we're going to actually be using them, but we want to keep them whole also. So I'm going to copy it, duplicate it, and just put them over here to the side somewhere so that as we're working with these, and changing them, we still have our original over here to use later. This is just a drawing border. You can get rid of it. So what we're going to do is use the shapes that we have here to extrude walls for the theater. When you're building a 3D model of a space, usually you're building it so that you can put something else in it. So you can put a set design in it, or so that you can put a lighting design in it. You're not actually modeling the building so that you have an accurate model of the building. You're just using the building model as a shell for something else. So we're not trying to make a super accurate real 3D representation of what the building actually looks like. We're just trying to get basically a digital version of like the model boxes that you see people building in set design class, which bears a resemblance to the theater but doesn't really look like the theater. Actually, it looks with all of the detail and things. So I say that, I point that out because when you look at the section, you'll notice the walls are all different heights. The fly loft is of course taller than the auditorium is. We're just going to build our 3D model with all the walls the same height because it's faster. If you're really interested in how to make this more accurate, I'll be happy to talk to you individually, but I've never had a problem just doing it like this. So I'm going to take the tape measure here and decide that I think I'm just going to make the whole space as tall as the fly loft is approximately. So and if we use the stage floor as 0, So we've got a 39 feet 7. We're just going to call that 40 feet um, just to make it easy. So uh, there are a couple of decisions you can make. We could decide to make the actual here 0 and not the stage floor. I think it's easier to make the stage floor 0 and extrude the stage floor down like we've talked about before, so that 0 is up here, is the stage floor, not down here. Hopefully that makes sense. So what I'm going to do here is just first of all make sure I'm in top plan view, and when we open the program we always are. I'm going to grab this wall, and thinking ahead, I can either extrude these walls the way they are and then add pieces of walls on top of them to create the wall over the door, or I can just sort of make it all a continuous thing and then go back and cut holes in it later. And I think that's the easier way to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete these lines, which we're not going to need, at least not for right now. For that, we can get rid of the plaster line. We can get rid of this. And I'm going to go ahead and join these things together. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and hopefully when this was originally drafted, oops, I don't want rotated rectangle, I want regular rectangle. Hopefully when this was originally drafted it was drawn so that these match. Oh look, good, they do. I originally drew it so it's my fault if it doesn't work. So I'm going to select this and then do modify add surface just to close in the doorway there. I'm going to do the same thing back here. We'll just add that. We can add this. We can add all of these together. Oops. I add surface. So far so good, except this didn't add, probably because I didn't have it selected. Modify, add surface. Why? Why is it doing that? Is this a group? It's a group. You can't add groups. So bye-bye. We're going to draw that again. We're going to try this again. Modify, add surface. There we go. That's better. Okay. So we're also going to close in this wall. Surface, and we'll close in these down here as well, this door that's over by the dimmers, and also the door out to the lower lobby. Select all of those things and add surface. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to close in the proscenium, break it over. Well, that's interesting. So the first thing I'm going to discover here is that somebody, and that would be me, when they drew this original plan that was drawn 12 years ago and we've been using it since, it doesn't line up. So womp womp. So I'm going to go ahead and I can do two things. I can decide one of these things is wrong and I don't know which one. So I'm just going to kind of arbitrarily decide, because it's easier for this one to be the right one because it's bigger. And remember, I said that we're not trying to make like a super accurate model here. We're just trying to make a representation. So I can bring that over to there and modify, add surface. There we go. All right. So now we have one continuous polygon that we can extrude. But before we do that, I'm going to think ahead a little bit more. I'm also eventually going to need to extrude a floor for this. I can either trace around using the polygon tool draw around this entire space to make a big solid that's going to be the floor. Or I can use the polygon tool in a different way that I don't think we've used before. If you select the polygon tool, then up in the mode bar, it defaults to vertex mode, and that's the mode that we've been using. But there are two other modes. There's an inner boundary mode and there's an outer boundary mode, and this is pretty nifty. If you it looks like a lasso. If you select on that and then draw a selection line around all of this, watch what happens. It will create a polygon based on the outer boundary of all of the other things. So now I'm pretty easily, now I've got a floor, bam. So then I can send this to back, send to back. And I actually want to cut off this part of the floor. I really just want the stage. So I don't really need this part here. So I'm gonna actually send it back to the front. Modify, send to front, and get out my chainsaw and cut off. There's modify clip surface, and we're going to hit delete. And okay, so now I got rid of this part of the floor that I don't need. So I'm going to go ahead and send this to the back again. Modify, send to back. There we go. All right. So now I'm going to select the whole, and here's another line actually that I don't need. I can get rid of that. And actually, while I'm thinking about it, I don't need this stuff either, because this is 2D stuff and I'm going to add back later. So I'm just going to declutter and get rid of all this extra stuff, including the center line, the mystery line, the other mystery line. Okay, hopefully there are no more mystery lines. There should only be a couple of, oh, so there's still lines left here that were the original lines. So there should only be two objects here if I select. Okay, good. There's the walls and the floor. So what I'm going to do now is extrude. I'm going to select the walls and extrude them the 40 feet that we talked about measuring from this top of the stage deck to the top of the fly loft. So we're going to extrude this 40 feet model, extrude 40 feet. Okay. And then we're going to extrude the floor down, and we're going to go down this distance, which I think is 18 inches, but I wouldn't bet my life on it. So 1 foot 2, close. So 14 inches, not 18 inches. So we're going to extrude this model, extrude minus 14 inches, minus 14. Okay. Just going to move this out of the way a little bit. So then if I go to front view, hit 2, there we have the beginnings of our model of the theater. And you'll notice it doesn't look like much right now. If I hit 3, you can start to see a little more of the space taking shape. So we're going to go back to the plan view, and we need to cut the proscenium out now. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to do a solid subtraction. So I need to create a rectangle that is the size of the hole that we want to cut out. So I'm going to go back over here to my 2D model, and I'm going to draw this rectangle that's this size, and I'm actually going to go ahead and make it a little bit larger than it needs to be. Then the other thing I need to do is I need a placement, since I deleted the center line, and as hopefully you all know, the center line in this theater of ours does not actually run through the center of the proscenium, or through the center of the stage, or through the center of the auditorium. There are actually 3 different centers, so good luck figuring out where center actually is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a reference line right here so that I know where this corner is. So if I select this line that I just drew and this rectangle, and then drag them both back over to my 3D drawing, I can use this point and put it right there, which will locate the rectangle for me, and then I can delete that line. Okay, so that's step one. So I've got the left and right placement of the proscenium there. So now I need to determine how tall the proscenium is. I'm reasonably sure it's 1311, but let's see what our drawing says. Our drawing says that it's 1310 and a half, so I'm going to call it 1311. That's close enough for, because I don't, who knows if this drawing is accurate, and I'm reasonably sure that we've measured the proscenium at 1311. So what I'm going to do now is extrude this 13 feet 11 inches. Model extrude 13 feet 11. Okay. Then I'm going to switch to front view, hit 2. It's sitting where it should be. I just wanted to check that because I extruded the floor down. When I extrude things up, they start at 0, so that's good. So I'm going to switch to isometric by hitting 3. And then I'm going to select the rectangle that we just extruded and the rest of the walls, and I'm going to do a model subtract solids. I'm going to subtract from the big piece. We'll click OK, and there's our proscenium. So now we have the proscenium. I don't feel the need to include all of the rest of the openings in the walls. I don't foresee the need for what we're going to be doing anytime in the near future to have this door, or the door to the shop, or the doors over here, or the door to the green room. We don't really need them, so I'm not going to create them. If you wanted to do that, you would do it the same way. You would draw using the 2D plan, draw rectangles using a locator so that you know where to put them on the other side, extrude them the right height, subtract them from the walls, and then if you wanted to add the actual doors in, you could do that. But I don't see the need. We really don't need to do that. We do, however, need to add the ceiling over the main stage. This is one of the few theaters that you will ever model that you need to make sure to add the ceiling in, because the ceiling is so low in this space. And in any normal theater, the ceiling is going to be up here somewhere, and so people generally don't add the ceiling into the theater model. But since our ceiling is right on top of our proscenium, it's a good idea for us to add some semblance of ceiling into the drawing. So in order to get that shape, that's weird sloped ceiling, hopefully you all know what I'm talking about, we've got to go look at our section, and here's the ceiling as it sits over the apron. And then we also have this giant honking plaster thing that surrounds the catwalk. And it's useful to have part of that at least in the drawing. I don't, however, need the rest of this. So I'm going to cut out this piece here so that I can use this piece, which is the dropped ceiling, and then the overall shape of the catwalk. So I'm going to use a line here with, I'm going to change here to screen plane so that what we're drawing from now on is going to be on the screen plane. If I draw this again, and say modify clip surface, and that cuts that there, and then I'm also going to cut it here, modify clip surface. So now I have this piece and this piece. The next question I have for myself is how far do I need to, I'm going to extrude these obviously, how far do I need to extrude them? And the answer is we have to look back at the ground plan, and I need it to go at least from this point to this point. And I might as well just go all the way over to this point. What the heck? So, and in fact, we really could just go from here to here. So that is 71 feet 11 inches, give or take. So 71 escape. 71 feet 11 inches. So back to here, I'm going to extrude this, but I don't want to extrude it in front view because it's, if I did that, then I have to rotate it later. What I'm going to do is extrude it in the side view. So I want to change my view from, right now I'm in top plan, I want to change to left because that's the view that this section is drawn in. It's drawn from the left, obviously. So I'm going to select my drop ceiling here and my partial catwalk, and I'm going to model extrude that 71 feet 11 inches. Okay. Then I'm also going to need a locator for this. So I'm going to draw a line here that is going to, the right side of this line is going to touch the plaster line at the back of the top of the proscenium at the plaster line is where that line is going to touch. So I'm going to select that and these two things together. I'm going to drag them over here. And if I look at my model here, right here is the top of the proscenium. So this is the place right there where that I want that line to line up. So I'm going to grab this by right there and drag it to right there. So now I can delete that line. So now this is in the right place, up and down, and upstage, downstage, but I really don't know where it is, stage left, stage right. So in order to get it in the right place there, I have to go to ground plan. And you'll see that this is in fact not really in the right place at all. It actually seems like it's starting at the center line, so I just need to move it over. I'm going to nudge it over. Then if we hit 2 and look at this from the front, once again, that doesn't show us a lot, but if we look at it in isometric and then use our orbiting tool, you can and here's something to bear in mind about the orbiting tool. You notice this is doing something weird. It's not orbiting the way I wanted it to. The orbit tool has modes over here, and the second one is object center mode, but so it will orbit around the center of an object, but you have to actually have an object selected in order for that to work. So if I select my theater and then go to orbit it in orbit center or object center mode, now it's doing what I wanted it to do, which is rotate around the theater itself. And if we go into OpenGL, you can see that there we have, hopefully you can tell that that looks like our lovely main stage theater. Okay, so now that I've gotten the base theater model built, I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup here, because if I just wanted to make a 3D model of a set just to do a rendering of it, or well, actually not a light plot, I could just stop right now and use the theater model as it is. Actually, that's not true. First, I would need to make sure that the walls are all black. So let's do that. And here's a tip for 3D modeling. When you hopefully you all have noticed in the theater that something that actually is a little bit annoying. There is no real black. If you paint something black, if you use black fabric, you can still see it. It doesn't actually disappear. Some things are darker than others, but the black walls in the theater don't actually go away. So, however, digitally, if you paint something black, it actually will disappear. If I made the walls of the theater black and put a ghost light on the stage, it would look like just a solid black rectangle. Unlike in real life in the theater, if the theater's empty and everything's painted black and we put a light on, you can still see the walls there, right? So instead of making the walls absolutely black, the last color here, which is black, I'm going to set them to 90% gray instead. So they're going to look like they're black. I mean, if you look at this, it looks almost like it's black, but they're still going to show up a little bit. So you'll be able to see the edges of the walls and things. So that's a tip, is that digital land, you actually can do what you wish you could do in real life, which is make things absolutely disappear. So the next thing I'm going to do, uh, like I said, I could just take this and just go right into the modeling thing, but I'm eventually going to want to create a ground plan probably from my model. And while I have kind of sort of overhead view of the theater here, it's not really appropriate for a ground plan. Because I've got the ceiling thing here. I don't have the doors and things that we didn't model. The proscenium is solid. It's not a dashed line like it's supposed to be, so not good. However, Vectorworks gives us the ability to create hybrid objects, and we talked about this a little bit last semester with lighting instruments. So if you remember, a lighting instrument, when you draw a light plot, the lighting instruments in Vectorworks are hybrid objects, meaning that if you're in top plan view, it shows you a 2D drawing of the lighting instrument, but if you're in top view, it shows you the actual 3D geometry of the instrument. So we can do the same thing. You can create your own hybrid object. So what I want to do is create a hybrid object that looks like this when I'm in top plan view. So it looks like what we expect a ground plan to look like, but in all of the other views, in any of the 3D views, it looks like this. That's pretty handy. So that's why I had you save the drawings here. We're going to use them over again. I am, however, going to get rid of this drawing border. I don't need that. But I'm going to go ahead and, first of all, I'm just going to check this out and make sure that it's right. And, oh, look, it's not. So the plaster line should be dashed. I hope you all remember that from last semester. So that should be a dashed line, and this should be a long dash, short dash line. So we're going to make that line type and set it to long, where is it? Somewhere. Long dash, short dash, there it is. Okay. And it looks like there's an extraneous line. Yep, there that is. Okay. And then everything else, well, everything, let's just set everything to 0.25. And then go back and change our imaginary lines to 0.13, just so that we have, and it looks like I don't have zoom line thicknesses on, probably, if you remember that from last semester. Let's see, display, no, zoom. So yeah, so these are thicker than that. So that now it looks like it's supposed to. I don't really need the scale bar anymore. I do want the sight lines. So I'm just going to go ahead and group this together. And then I'm going to drag it over here and put it right on top of the model that we just built. So I'm going to line it up by picking really any corner. I'm going to pick this corner and put it right there. Okay, so now this, you should see that it lines up. You remember that we fudged the proscenium a little bit because the way it's drawn, it appears to not be the same thickness on either side of the stage. And I think it really is, although given the space, who knows. But so this is lined up pretty closely. So now what I can do is select all of the objects, the 2D object and the 3D object. And you can do this with any 2D object and 3D object if you have them together like this. Then you can go to Modify, Create Symbol, and I'm going to tell it this is the 3D main stage. You can leave all of this just like it is. I'm going to change its class in a minute. We'll just change the class, but click OK, and look what happened. So this is, if when we're in top plan view, we have our traditional ground plan view, but then when we switch to top view, now we have the 3D view, and if we go to any of the other 3D views, we have the 3D model. So we have the best of both worlds here. We have our 3D model, but we also have at the same time a 2D representation that allows us to draw a ground plan that conforms to all of the standard drafting conventions that hopefully you all learned last semester. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is draw in some of the electrics. Normally, you don't really usually model all of the battens and things. Like if you were building a real 3D non-virtual model, you probably wouldn't model all the battens. You would model the ones that you are actually hanging things from. I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup on the classing here. So I'm going to open up my navigation palette, and you'll see that the classes that you probably will have are the zero class, the dimension class. With those, the dimension class and the none class are always in every Vectorworks file. We also brought in from the 2D theater drawing that we copied in the light pipes. So what I want to do is create a new class that is called theater architecture that we're going to put the theater itself in. So we're just going to new theater architecture. Okay. Just leave all that the same. That's fine. And there we have it. So then I'm going to select this, and over in object info, it's currently in the light pipes class. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the theater architecture class. So there we have that. And just to double check, I'm going to double click on this and check the 2D component and make sure that all of this stuff is in the theater architecture class. Yes, I do want to do that. And I'm going to click exit symbol. And then I'm going to double click again, and now I want to edit the 3D component and select all of that and make sure that those things are also in the theater architecture class. Yes. So now the symbol itself is in the theater architecture class, and then all the stuff inside the symbol is also in the 3D architecture class. You may notice that unlike groups, we talked about last time, that when you put a group in a class, it will ask you, do you want me to put all the stuff that's in the group in the same class, or do you just want me to put the group in the class? When you change the class of a symbol, it doesn't ask you that. In order to make all of the stuff inside the symbol in the same class, you have to actually edit the symbol by double clicking on it, and if it's a hybrid symbol, edit both the 2D component and the 3D component and change it. So I just wanted to make sure that everything is all in the theater architecture class, and it is. So so now we have that. Then I'm going to go ahead and just move this up so it's in the center of the page. Obviously, we would need a bigger page if we were going to print this out, but so there we have that. Then what I want to do is create a new layer to put the lighting stuff on, because I'm likely going, when I create a ground plan for this set that we're putting in here, I'm likely going to not want to have all the lights in the ground plan. I'm going to want to turn them off, and the easiest way to do that is just to put them on a layer and set the layer visibility to 0. By the same token, I probably want to create a scenery layer so that if I were drawing a light plot, I might want to just be able to turn the scenery off. So we're going to go ahead and it's easier to do that with a layer than a class. So I'm going to go ahead and go to layers, and we're going to go ahead and rename the design layer as the theater architecture layer. And you can have a theater architecture layer and also have a theater architecture class. There's no problem there. So I have the theater both in the theater architecture layer and in the theater architecture class. Then I'm going to create a new class, new layer that's called scenery, and then one more layer that is called lighting. Now what I want to do is draw in some lighting positions. So I want to go to the lighting layer, and I also want to go ahead and work in the light class, which we already have a class called light pipes, so we're going to want to work in that class, and then we're going to draw in the 3 electrics. So I'm going to do a little bit of construction lining here. I know where the 3 electrics are because they're marked here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw just lines across here so I can set these up. And then I know that our electrics, our pipes are approximately 30 feet long. Those of you who know the theater know that actually all of the pipes are different lengths. It's just silly, but the average is 30 feet. So they also are not really centered, but for our purposes here, I'm just going to center 30 feet pipes on the center line because that's what they should be, even though they're not. So I'm going to draw a line here and then modify move minus 15 feet. 15 feet, 0 inches, and then we'll do another one and positive 15 feet. Let's hit it. And I think I'm going to group all of these things together because I'm going to eventually want to delete them, and that's just going to make life easier. All right, so now we have the layout of where the pipes are, and I'm going to use the lighting pipe tool. You may remember this, you probably don't, but you might from the light plot that we drew last semester. So I'm going to select the lighting pipe tool, and I'm just going to click, and then I'm going to double click to end it. Object info is going to pop up and ask, well, it's not really going to ask, but it's going to allow me to change some things. Like, for instance, the location of this is actually the third electric. And I can also, these pipes are inherently hybrid objects, so it's drawing just a line in 2D here, but when I go to 3D, it actually draws the pipe, and so I can give it a height. Our proscenium was 14 feet tall. I set the electrics at, I don't know, 16 feet. Seems like a reasonable place to start. So then if we look at this, and I'm going to go ahead and highlight this, and front view, you'll see that, actually let's go to isometric. You can see that we have a 3D pipe 16 feet above the ground, but in 2D we have the representation of the electric. I'm not right this very minute turning these into lighting positions, which is something that if I were going to draw a light plot I would need to do. Hopefully you remember that from last semester, that there's a difference between a lighting pipe and a lighting position. A lighting position lets you do some other things, so I just need pipes right now, so I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. I'm going to put that there, and we can make that the second electric, and we'll put one here, which is going to be the first electric. Okay, then I can delete my setup lines. So now I have those electrics there. Oh, lighting pipe. We'll put that right there. And it is about 14.6 maybe. We move it occasionally, but so that is the anti-pro. Well, 40 feet seems like a logical length for that, so I'm going to go ahead and draw this line 40 feet long, 40 feet, and I'm going to put it on center line, and I'm going to draw my light pipe right on top of this, but then I'm going to need to, I want to delete this line, but because I'm going to have two lines on top of each other, it's going to be really hard for me to select this line, so I'm going to go ahead and draw a handle on it and group these two things together. Modify group, so that when I draw the pipe on top of this, does that line look like it's straight? I don't think it looks like it's straight. So I'm going to hold down shift, and it's not, while I'm drawing this line. I'm going to make that one straight. But if I had originally drawn this line straight, I wouldn't have been able to select it because it would have been under the other line. So that's why I put the handle there, so now I can delete that. And we're going to say that this is probably 15 feet. Maybe we're going to have to take a look at this one. And then, so this is the apron pipe. Apron pipe. I'm gonna actually, 15 feet was a guess of a place to start. I'm gonna hit 4. 4, there we go. And look at this pipe. And so I discovered that it actually is above the ceiling, which is not, of course, that doesn't, it makes it really hard to hang lights there. So I'm going to nudge it down. I think it hangs about a foot below. I thought the ceiling slopes higher than that, which is why I put it at 14 feet. So we're going to modify, move down 12 inches. Minus 12. Okay, that's probably where that pipe actually is. And then we're going to put in one of the catwalk pipes. I think we'll just put in the top catwalk. So we're going to measure that, and that distance is so it's like 17.6 basically. So 0 back to there, and the catwalk pipes are longer than the apron pipe are. I think we can safely say that they go from there to there. They might actually even be longer than that, but it's close enough for what we're doing here. So I'm going to draw this. What did we say? 17 feet 6 inches. I'm going to call this catwalk. And then exactly where that goes, upstage, downstage, I have to look at the section view, the side view again. So I'm going to hit 4. Yeah, that's way too far downstage. It's really more like right. Well, depending on which pipe I'm drawing, if it's the top pipe, it's actually back here. If it's the far pipe, it's more like right there. I'm going to put it in a position that doesn't really exist and put it right there because it's going to be more useful for model lighting if it's there. 0. And then I think I'll go ahead and put in the new front of house pipe too. And I'm just going to copy this and call it FOH1, H1. And I feel like, why is that not the center? It goes about 2 feet downstage of the catwalk, so back to 4. That's a little close. Maybe a little. It's also lower than it's somewhere right along in there. I think is where it is. It's close enough. Like I said, I'm putting these in to drop in lights to light the model. I'm not putting these in to draw an accurate light plot. If I were going to do that, I would want to check the actual dimensions, both by looking at previous light plots and also probably going to the theater with a tape measure and checking and making sure that I was putting them in the right place, because it would be important to have them in the right place if I were actually working on lighting. But since I'm just putting lights on a model, I don't need them to be quite so accurate. Okay, so there's that. And if we go to front view here, you can see that we have the theater, we have the pipes. So the next thing we want to do is set up a perspective view of this space, because that's going to be useful for everything that we're doing. So we're going to go back to ground plan or top plan view, and we're going to do this the same way that we did it with the tables project last week. So I'm going to move my navigation to my other monitor. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of, wrong layer. I need to be on the theater architecture layer. This is clearly theater architecture layer, not scenery. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to hang on to this for a minute because we're eventually going to want to create some viewports that have a ground plan and a section in them. But we're not going to do that quite yet. So begin the theater architecture layer, and I want to set a 3D view. So I'm going to drag this out of the way. We're going to go to view, set 3D view. The first click determines where the viewer is. So I think I want to be on the center line. And then you draw a line looking towards the direction that you're looking. And the nice thing about this is you can, I could look at, so what if the view looked like from this seat over here? I could click there and then look towards the stage, or I could look at really any seat. But for purposes of what we're doing right now, I just want a straight on perspective view. So I'm going to just draw a straight line. And I think my viewer height of 6 feet. I mean, if I were sitting down in the first row, I would actually be at about 3 feet. I'm going to look at this and see what it looks like. But if I'm sitting in the center of the house, I'm actually probably more like 5 feet than 6 feet. If I were standing up, I would be at 6 feet. But sitting down in the center of the house, maybe at about 5 feet. And I already know that normal doesn't work very well in our space. I'm going to go ahead and set it to narrow. You would think that wide would be the right thing, but actually narrow perspective works better. And in fact, in most theater renderings, it does. So we're going to click OK, and then we're going to get this view of the theater, which actually now should start to look like something that more closely resembles what you would expect it to look like. Okay, so you'll notice that when I'm in perspective mode here, as I use my mouse to scroll in and out, it's not only making things bigger and smaller, but it's actually changing the perspective. And that drives me crazy. I would like to be able to set the perspective and then be able to zoom in and out without actually changing the perspective. Hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to do a couple things here. The first thing I'm going to do is the whole reason I created this model is because I'm trying to create a rendering of a set, probably. So I'm want to think about what my final output is going to be, and I'm probably going to want a large-ish drawing because I'm going to want to show it to a director or something. So my 8.5 by 11 sheet here is probably not big enough. So I'm going to go ahead and decide that I want this to be an 11 by 17 drawing when I'm done. So I'm going to go to File, Page Setup, and do a printer setup, really any printer for tabloid. So it's 11 by 17, and I'm going to put it in landscape mode. So now you can see that my page size is bigger, but as I'm zooming here, I'm not getting any closer. I'm not zooming into the page, I'm just changing the perspective. There's a way to sort of fix this, if you will, and it's by creating a perspective crop, so that the entire drawing is not in perspective. It's kind of a little bit like creating a perspective viewport, if you think of it that way, in the design layer. So what I'm going to what I want to do rather is to go to File, Document Settings, Document Preferences, select that, and I want to select Cropped Perspective. So once I do that, then now when I scroll in and out, I'm actually getting bigger and smaller, but I'm not changing the perspective. It's staying the same inside this crop. So you can this is like a photo crop. You can change the size of the crop. Usually what I do is go ahead and set the crop to be about the same size as the paper, so that I know that within this crop I can adjust the drawing to be to fill the amount of it that I want to. So so now I can't change the perspective by zooming in and out. I have to use other tools in order to do that. So what I'm going to do is go to the tool set here that is that's not right, the tool set with the light, which is sort of the viewing tool set. And I have some options here. I have flyover, which is the same thing that we always use. If I use flyover, I've got our normal flyover. I'm going to undo that. When I fly over, it does change the viewing that I set up. When set 3D view, where I set myself out of the house, as soon as I fly over, it changes that. It sort of just erases that, and you would have to do that over again. So I actually don't want to fly over. What I really want to do is either a walkthrough or a translate view. Usually what I want is translate view. And when you select and translate view up here in the mode bar, you get a couple of things. The first one will let you move sort of in the current plane. And if you look closely, if you see what's happening, the perspective is actually changing a little bit. You see now this wall is bigger here, and then when I move over here, now you're seeing the other side of the wall. So I actually didn't want to do any of that. I want to put it back where it was. And you'll notice that my viewport crop is changing too. So we'll put that back. What I really want here is translate view is this one, which is the perspective move in, move out mode. It's almost like a camera zoom on the perspective. So the way this works is it's a little funky. If you click and drag up, you zoom in, and if you click and drag down, you zoom out. So I want to go ahead and zoom in a lot. What I really want is just this portion of the stage. I really don't want the whole building. Actually, I would really love to get rid of the whole building, but that's a different story for a different time. So sort of want to fill and then I can go back and use this one and move so that I'm actually and what I'm looking at here is I'm trying to get the proscenium so that it's I'm seeing the same amount of the sidewall, so that I know that I'm basically kind of centered properly. And it looks like I need to see more of over here maybe, so I might need to zoom out a little more so that we see more of that. It sort of depends on, if I know what the set design is going to be, how much of the stage I actually need to see. That might be about right. The other tool here is the perspective adjustment mode, and this actually changes the perspective itself, and it will make a narrower or a wider perspective. If you remember, I said when we originally started off in narrow, if you start off with a normal perspective or a wide perspective, it really distorts the theater and it gives you a false impression of what it looks like. Usually you want a shallower perspective when you're doing a drawing of a theater rendering, or if you're doing a rendering of a theater model. So I want something generally that looks more like this than like this. This isn't a realistic look at what the theater looks like. This, it looks more like it would actually look if I were sitting in the audience, which is usually what I'm trying to do. So then if we look at OpenGL here, you can see, oh look, I didn't make my electrics black. I need to go back and do that. But you can see what I was talking about the black walls, that they're black, but you can still see what they look like, as opposed to if I made them, because I'm in the symbol now, I have to go back and do that. But if I made them actually black, they would all look just like this right here, and you wouldn't be able to see anything. So I think this view seems like it's about right, maybe. I'm going to go ahead and save this view. Save view as front perspective. Let's capitalize our P. And then I'm going to go to top view. I'm going to hit 0. And actually what I really want is top, top, not top plan, so that I can, and I want to be in the lighting layer so that I can select all of my light pipes and make them not white. It seems like black would probably be an appropriate color. And I'm going to do the same thing with those. I'm not going to make them solid black, but I'm going to make them 90% gray. So there we have that. So then if we go back to our front perspective, now my light pipes are black. Something else you might want to know, just as you're if you're I probably, if I were going to print this out, I probably would want to crop down a little bit here. I don't really need all of this ceiling. It is a little strange the way that at least it's strange to me, the way that this sort of lands in the space right here. You can make all of this black if you set a black background for the layer. In some ways, having this here sort of really lets us know where the edge of the stage is, and in other ways, it from a design basics standpoint, it looks kind of weird to me. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a black background. So we're going to go to our resource browser, open that up. We're going to look at our wood from last time. We're going to go to this particular file, and you'll see there's our main stage symbol that we created, and we're going to make a new resource, RenderWorks background, and I'm going to call it black background. We want it to be one color, and I want that one color to be black. Okay, all right. We can close that. And then if we go to the layer, the architectural layer, and edit it, you can give each layer can have its own background. We're going to give this the black background, and click OK there. Now you'll notice that the background has filled in black. And just to be consistent with the top, I probably am going to want to drag that up a little bit. But so there's sort of a view of our stage. I'm gonna save this again because I made some changes to it. I changed the crop of the perspective, so I'm going to go ahead and save view as front perspective again. Front perspective, and if I spell that right, will ask me, do you really want to? Yeah, it says I already have one. Do you want to write over it? Yes, I do. Thank you. And then I think while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and put in a scale. I'm gonna put Scale Guy on stage. Scale Dude. It's his turn to bask in the glow of the spotlight. You always want to include a scale figure whenever you're doing a rendering or a model. So we need to make him 3D in order to put him in the set. So right now this is a group. I'm just going to double click on it. I'm not quite sure why it's a group. This is just a polygon, so I'm going to edit, copy, exit the group, paste. And we're going to extrude Scale Dude. He's not a very interesting guy. He's only going to get in 1 inch of extrusion, so he's really wooden. See, you got it? He's a cutout. So there he is. We're going to drag him up here. Now, because I did that in the wrong view, I should have really gone to front view before I did that. When I go to front view, poor Scale Dude is laying on his side. He's dead. So we're going to go to left and rotate him. Modify, rotate right. So now he's standing up, and we're going to plop him down on the stage. We're going to go to we're going to go to front view and actually move him over to the stage. There he is. There's Scale Dude's one-man show. And then I think it would also be nice to give him a light. So rather than putting in a stage light, which we're going to talk about in the next project, I'm just going to go ahead and put just a regular point source light bulb in, just right here. I'm going to go to left view, and so this is basically sort of like a ghost light kind of deal. I'm just going to raise this up some reasonable height, and then if I go to front perspective now, when I saved this view, it saved the OpenGL, so it's an OpenGL. Now I'm gonna look and see what happens if I go to File Quality RenderWorks. We'll give it a minute, and yeah, it's not a whole lot different, except that you can see that Scale Dude is casting a big shadow on the back wall. But because we don't actually have any scenery in the theater yet, there's not a whole lot to see. But we will be adding the room in the next video here, and it will start to look a little bit more like what you expect a theater rendering to look like.